Welcome to PwC's Business in Focus podcast. I'm Rachel Lovell, and our guest today is Virgin Group CEO Josh Bayliss, who will be in conversation with Pete Brown, MBE, leader of PwC's global workforce practice. Today, we'll be exploring how, after 55 years, Virgin continues to pair disruption with purpose and agility with reinvention. And with 40 companies in 5 continents covering health, finance, and wine, alongside holidays and telecoms, there's no shortage of business insights and stories to uncover.
Josh, it's absolutely brilliant to have you here, and thanks so much for your time. Virgin Group is famed for its ability to reinvent and find new markets and opportunities. Indeed, it has a long-standing reputation for continuous reinvention and disruption in various sectors. How do you walk the walk and combine disruption with purpose to change business for good?
Richard was a trailblazer in many ways in inverting the pyramid of shareholder value to ensure that you don't start with the shareholder, but you end with the shareholder. So when we think about that very broad approach to business and to purpose, it really does define the way that we go about transformation, as you say, or disruption, but actually just everything that we do. In terms of the disruption itself, I mean, again, I'd say the brand is something that really sets the bar for us. Virgin, which Richard established 55 years ago, has always been about disrupting the status quo. It's always been about trying to find a better way. And in that sense, it's a truly entrepreneurial brand. Of course, we have one of the greatest entrepreneurs of his generation, probably the leading entrepreneur of his generation anywhere in the world, in fact, and Richard as the founder of the group. And he continues to be very actively involved with the business. And so he's, driving us hard to continue to be disruptive and entrepreneurial. But actually, as I say, I think the brand itself is something that sets the standard. We want people who come to the brand either as employees or as customers to have a great time, be able to be included, involved, express themselves. And we think the way to do that is to be always looking for a better way of doing business.
I love that. I love that view, particularly around the focus on the customer, but the way you talk about your employees, because actually they're one and the same, and that comes across very loudly. Now, I know that Virgin Group has signed and is a member of the Better Business Act. What does that? Can you tell us a little bit more about that and why you're signed up to that?
So the Better Business Act is something that has been around for about 4 years, I think 3 or 4 years. And it says that when directors are exercising their fiduciary duties, they shouldn't just have regard or even primary regard to the interests of shareholders. And we're very attracted to this because actually it's sort of the way that we've always done things. Certainly, purpose is something that's been part of the brand from day one, I think. So when the Better Business Act came along, it wasn't like a bolt of lightning from the blue for us. It was really just an acknowledgement of things that we've always done. So we adopted it, we being Virgin Management, which is the center of the Virgin Group, Virgin Red, which is our loyalty business, and Virgin Startup, which supports entrepreneurial businesses in the UK. We all decided that we would adopt the Better Business Act. And so what we've done is we've actually amended our articles of association of the top company in the Virgin Group so that the directors on the board of Virgin Group Holdings, of which I am one, have to have, and Richard is another, have to have regard to that broader set of considerations when we are making any business decision. This year, for instance, it was a target for us to adopt science-based targets for our portfolio of businesses. And of course, we recognize that our portfolio includes businesses that certainly do have an impact on the environment. There's no question about that. We've made it a priority to achieve net zero before 2050, as of course of a number of other businesses. But we're really reaching into the portfolio and looking at ways that we can address the deficit that we currently have. So, for example, we recognize that sustainable aviation fuel will be a part of that journey. You may have seen that Virgin Atlantic flew across the Atlantic Ocean last year using sustainable aviation fuel, which, while it doesn't entirely eliminate carbon emissions, it certainly significantly reduces them and is going to be a hugely important part of the, I say, bridge from where we are today to where we need to be. And I think it's that concept of really trying to work in partnership with others, whether that's governments in relation to the formation of policy, or suppliers in relation to, first, second, third impact of emissions and what have you. We're always looking to challenge ourselves and hold ourselves to account to ensure that we're able to meet those targets. And so SBTI was a natural program for us to partner with and to adopt, and we will be judged not just by the board who decide to pay our compensation, but by our customers and our employees on whether or not we're able to address and achieve those objectives.
What comes across loud and clear is, dare I say, the constant fidgetiness of Virgin Group and probably yourself. The fact that your markets are changing, your customers are changing, technology is changing, the climate's changing. And it sounds like you're constantly reacting to that, planning for that, trying to stay ahead of that. Every year at PwC, we conduct the annual CEO survey. I think we had some 4,500 who responded this year. And we launch it at Davos. And what that revealed really is the evolving nature of how business leaders view transformation. That it's no longer just about growth. It's holistic, and it's tied to an organization's survival more than ever before. Given the vast and diverse portfolio that you have within Virgin Group, how have you managed that constant transformation, and what's been your overarching approach?
I agree with you in relation to the need for businesses to reinvent themselves in exactly that way. I just, before I answer your question, I'll just also add, I personally think that businesses also have a responsibility in doing that, and a role to play. I think the reality is that, customers, people, citizens all over the world look to business to play that far more responsible role than they did previously, partly to fill the gap, but also to really, cash the checks that people write when they place trust in businesses and in brands, when they make decisions to select a product or a service from a business. There's a lot more to that decision nowadays than there once was. So I just feel that the entire game has changed, the context has changed, and in a world where we have social media, and if you don't get it right, you are going to be told PDQ that maybe you need to reassess and reevaluate the way that you're going about your business. I think it's a wonderful instant feedback loop. For us, the need to disrupt is something which, as I say, I think it's been there from day one, 55 years ago. It's not something that we've come to or happened upon, and so we think that continuing to push ourselves all the time, we say being brave in business, making bold decisions, even when they're not necessarily in your best interests from a financial point of view, but because they are the right thing to do, we think that's really at the core of it. And so if you hire the right people and you put them at the front line of your business and you entrust them with the ability to make decisions, empower them with the ability to judge in the moment really what's in the best interests of the customer and deal with the situation accordingly, then over time you tend to create better outcomes for customers, and that empowerment, of course, means that you create a business environment where people do feel a sense of belonging. We talk about the Virgin family. Lots of businesses talk about families. It could be a bit reductive, I suppose, but I certainly think that inclusion, which nowadays, of course, is a very, very oft used word, it's really the cornerstone of everything. If we if we open our doors for people to be included, no matter where they come from, what their background, and to express themselves, of course, consistently with the right sort of sets of values and legal rules and what have you, then we think that we're in the end we're gonna create a better environment for those people, and that'll be for everybody's benefit.
And Josh, actually, I think that link between the way you view your customers and your employees being kind of one of the same comes across there. And it's no surprise to me that I think in a world where there is a global shortage of key talent and skilled talent, I think the attrition rates at Virgin are amongst the lowest in the sector, which I think speaks volumes for the culture of the organisation. And if I could touch on culture, Josh, it's been written about you somewhere that you are a leader in the fight against sludge tax, the battles against initiatives, against unnecessary bureaucracy, meetings and processes. And I think well documented. I think probably 20 years ago that if anybody wore a tie, it would be rapidly cut off by a pair of scissors from Richard. How do you ensure that the agility of the brand remains intact through your people? And if I may, why do you think some other businesses struggle to replicate that?
At risk of repeating myself, I suppose first and foremost, I would say that I think it is about trust, and that's a two-way street. Empowerment means that you trust your people to do the right thing, and we're also very fortunate that I think the brand tends to attract people who want to do the right thing, not because it's what the book tells them to do, but it's just the right thing to do, and that appeals to them. And so it is a virtuous circle. I think that's right. But we do try to ensure that the point between decision and action is as short as possible. And what I mean by that is that I am frequently struck by the bureaucracy in large businesses, especially, but actually it can become endemic even in small businesses, and it's something that we try very hard to guard against. I think one of the things we've been very fortunate to have done is, rather than build one huge international organization called Virgin, we have spawned dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of companies which are all self-standing, self-governing, self-regulating, in the sense that they make sure that they do things the way that they see fit. And if we look at our CEOs of those businesses, almost like entrepreneurs in residence, who are empowered to be able to take the brand and very often our capital and partners' capital as well, and operate in their industry in the way that they see fit, in order to achieve the objectives that we provide to them through the brand. Those are considered not to be sort of red lines, if you like. It's much more a supportive relationship, where we give people maybe some guardrails, maybe some guidance on what we think will show the brand in its best light. And it is the things I've talked about empowering your people, about creating differentiated experiences, about creating moments of magic, and about eliminating moments of friction. All of those concepts of entrepreneurialism, if you stick to that recipe, and we see it in, Virgin Atlantic has been flying for 40 years in the most competitive air corridor in the world. We could probably name 15 or 20 airlines that have come and gone in the time that Virgin Atlantic has existed in that same air corridor. And yet it continues to be an incredibly successful airline because of this point of differentiation. Virgin Voyages launched actually during the pandemic, which is a very strange time to launch a cruise line, I can assure you. But because Virgin Voyages has again maximized the points of the brand that create that differentiation, it's effectively reinventing a sector of the cruise industry, which, it's not because the vessels are any different. The vessels are state-of-the-art vessels built by Fincantieri in Italy, just like Virgin Atlantic's aircraft are Airbus and Boeing aircraft that everybody else flies. It's the experience that people have end to end when they touch the brand that enables them to feel that sense of individualization, of personality, of something that's just a little bit special.
You said you never cease to be surprised by the amount of bureaucracy, often in large organisations. That's something that's actually reflected in a survey that PwC do every year called the Hopes and Fears Survey. It's the largest survey of its kind. We asked some 56,000 workers in 55 countries about their attitude to their careers and their employers. Both workers and CEOs were aligned around the point around sludge tax and that unnecessary bureaucracy. What both constituents also believe is that GenAI could help reduce that sludge effect, but it can't just be fixed by technology alone. GenAI is becoming a key enabler of growth across many industries. How is Virgin leveraging AI to stay ahead and the forefront of innovation? How do you see it contributing to Virgin's growth and customer experiences?
Well, it's such an important question in relation to technology generally. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, just to cast your mind back to 2019. I can remember at the outset of the pandemic, we had our final ExCo meeting with all of our ExCo from around the world present in London in mid-February 2020. We decided that it was time to close the office, to retreat to our bunkers, as it were, and that we'd all stay in touch via Teams and Zoom. Now, if you fast forward to today, I think we've all become slightly used to the idea, a little bit too used to the idea, that every time you have a meeting, you should do it via Teams or Zoom, and you don't do a phone call anymore. Instead, you invite lots and lots of people, and you all have your cameras on. And I actually happen to think that it's maybe gone a little bit the wrong way, and that some of that technology, we should just go back to a good old-fashioned conference call with the minimum number of people involved and make it for the shortest amount of time possible, rather than being a sort of a standard hour-long exercise. Now, AI poses a completely different set of challenges. And obviously, it's something that's at the forefront of, I think, every business leader's thinking so far as technological development is concerned right now. I guess where we start from is that we think AI ought to amplify rather than hinder human potential. So we think the sort of ethics, if you like, of this is really important. I've heard a number of business leaders say AI is brilliant because it means that I'll be able to reduce my workforce by X%. We don't see it as a zero-sum game in that way. So we've developed a set of principles which we think are relevant to us so far as the brand is concerned. We've developed a collective of people from all over our business to keep abreast of AI and what it means for their people, for their customers, for their ability to deliver on the brand promises that I've already talked about, and really importantly, how we can remain consistent with our purpose as a business in delivering AI. Undoubtedly, there will be significant innovation. I was really interested to read last week a senior executive at Google saying that it's not certain that the productivity gains of AI will in fact all come true. There's a number of things that have to align for us to get there. I think it's really important as a society, as business leaders, that we talk about that being a just transition for everyone. So we've got a number of examples of how we have used AI already in our business. For example, I talked about Virgin Red, our loyalty program, which joins the dots for our Virgin customers across different businesses that they interact with. We have a data science and machine learning team, and they use AI to build a rewards assistant for Virgin Red so that people can use AI to work out how to optimize their points in order to make the most of the rewards that they are seeking to benefit from. We just recently completed, and it's not yet launched, so I won't give too much away, but we've just built an AI avatar for TikTok, which we think will really capture the essence of the brand and a really important platform that with its significant drawbacks, I think is no doubt the fastest growing and most important social media platform in the world. So within our core business, actually, I think about my own day to day, we have given people a secure version, access to a secure version of ChatGPT. So we can use AI within our business. And I must say, I mean, I use it, I would say most days, if not every day, to some extent. It's not a replacement for, but I think rather an augmentation of the tools that we already use within business. And we'll see how it develops from here.
It's interesting that you use it almost every day. So in the same survey on hopes and fears, when we ask people that question, how often do you use GenAI? Only 10% of workers say they use it every day. I think it's 60-odd% say they've used it at least once in the last 12 months. Now, clearly that will change.
Wow.
I was quite surprised, given all the noise around GenAI. I was expecting much greater take up at this early stage. And we also did some research, to your point, around the link to productivity. And we surveyed some 500 million job adverts in a piece of research called the AI Jobs Barometer. And what we found there, interestingly, was that in some sectors where they are really feeling the pinch in terms of the talent shortage, financial services, IT, and professional services, actually, we're seeing AI used very much, as you described there, to augment, to release capacity, to take away the mundane, the repetitive stuff that people frankly don't enjoy in their job. Still very early days, but it was really quite interesting to see that, I think, slightly optimistic view around how Gen AI can be used in conjunction with human beings.
Pete, sorry to interrupt, but just on that point, I mean, so far, I think a lot of the generative AI that we're seeing in the workplace and in the world more broadly is built upon LLM, large language models, and so we're getting the benefit of the knowledge that we have written down and which has been digested by these machines. If I just contrast that for just a second, for instance, with a business that we are investors in, it's called Auticon. So Auticon is a business that employs people who are somewhere on the autism spectrum. And the reason I raise it is because the point of differentiation at Auticon is that these people who have a different set of skills and experiences, those different set of skills and experiences enable them to do tasks, whether it is assessing an underwriting agreement for an insurance company, for the sake of argument, in a way which is different to the way that somebody who maybe graduated with a commerce degree from a university would have. They look at the words on the page in a different way. They experience the material in a different way. And I just wonder whether it's an important guide for the future, that it's really important to have multiple different viewpoints, multiple different sets of experience. And I'm not sure that AI alone is enough to supplant that richness of human experience myself. So I think it'll be part of the mix, but I'm not sure that it replaces the human element of it. And that's just one example.
No, I completely agree, Josh. We talk a lot with the organisations we work with around that essential sort of harmony between technology and human beings, and particularly in the context of Gen AI, but not exclusively. And at the Auticon, I was unaware actually that you're invested in Auticon. I know it reasonably well. Indeed, a couple of the organisations I work with use Auticon for precisely the reason you described. And I think as an example of enlarging inclusivity, it's a brilliant example.
It's terrific.
So we've covered, Josh, technology and strategy and many other things. I just want to focus a little bit around what does it mean to lead in the world in which we live. And up front, you talked about climate, and we've talked throughout this conversation around disruptive technology. We haven't really touched on, but things that we know are on the mind of many around the world: social instability, the obvious geopolitical tensions, and I've talked about the aging workforce. That led us at PwC to create the Centre for Transformative Leadership about 3 years ago, principally in response to many of the organisations we were working with, saying that many of the leaders within their organisations were really struggling to adapt in the world against that context. Lots of short-term crises against the longer-term trends that we need to solve for. What, if I may ask you, in terms of as the CEO of Virgin Group, what are the attributes you think are so important, critical for leaders both at Virgin Group and more broadly?
Well, I think you just touched on one that is really critical, and actually, I think I certainly am a beneficiary of, and that is timescales. So we are a private company, and I think I'm right that our average hold period in our investment portfolio is something like 17 years. So that sets us apart from public companies, sets us apart from private equity in a pretty significant way. I think that idea of being very long-term in your view on risk and reward is a great starting point for how to think about this. We've just come through a pandemic which had a significantly negative effect on our portfolio for 3 years. Was really very, very difficult for a number of our businesses, and it's only really been 2024, maybe 2023 in the last half, but 2024 as a whole year where things have come back. So that ability to be very long term in your thinking, I think, is a really important foundational aspect for decision making. I think we talked earlier about purpose and about the changing role of governments and business. I think that's also absolutely foundational to this question. Businesses have a broader responsibility than Milton Friedman espoused. It doesn't really matter whether you come at that as a matter of economics or whether you come at it as a matter of politics and history. But it certainly is the case that in modern society, business and business leaders have a different set of expectations, obligations, relationships, networks than they once did. And it's really important that those are used to maximum effect for the benefit of as many people as possible, in my view. And that means that you have to take into consideration the impact of war or geopolitical strain in thinking about both the impact that it has on your people, but also the brand ramifications of decisions that you make, the places that you are willing to deploy capital or perhaps stop deploying capital. And that could be geographically, could be industrially. All of those considerations are really highly relevant. I send an email to our employees every Friday, and I would say most Fridays, certainly over the past 3 or 4 years, my note has some reference to geopolitical events that are happening in the world rather than being narrowly focused just on what's happening within our own business. And that is simply because those events are highly relevant to the context we operate in.
Josh, we're very nearly close to the end. But before we close, could you share one piece of advice for business leaders who are trying to navigate the challenges of transformation, technology, and culture in today's dynamic environment?
I think the most important thing that every business leader must do is be adaptable. The world is a volatile place for sure right now, but even when it isn't a volatile place, that famous Mike Tyson line, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth," I think is really very apposite for business leaders. It's certainly been my experience. And so I remember when or shortly before I became CEO, sitting down with Richard and a beautifully curated strategy paper that I had pulled together saying, when I take over as CEO, these are all of the strategic objectives that I will set, and these are the things that we will do. And I walked him through it. He listened very patiently. We got to the end. He said, this is excellent. This is really, really good. But don't be constrained by it. Make sure that you remain opportunistic, that you remain open-minded, and that you're prepared for whatever might come your way. And having taken on that piece of advice, I think, is one of the best things that I did in my time as CEO. So I'd commend it to others.
Josh, thank you so much for a brilliant conversation. I could have continued all day, but time's against us. Thanks ever so much indeed.
My pleasure, Pete. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, as expected, that was an enlightening exploration of the insights and experience Josh has to offer from his 13 years at the helm of Virgin Group. And it just shows the power of the Virgin brand and how much of brand preference is down to how it makes you feel. Thank you so much once more to both Josh and Pete for their time, and thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of PwC's Business in Focus podcast.